it's a privilege to be able to do that. So my name is Kevin Tetz. I work as a spokesperson with the Eastwood Company. I help, share some information with some of their R&D stuff. It's really exciting. The thing that really jacks me up about Eastwood is that they don't just want to sell you tools. They want to teach you how to use the tools, and they want to teach you to have a successful experience with your use of the tools. So yes, it's business. They want to sell you more tools. Of course they do. But they have great products, and they want to empower people to like I said, have successes and be able to repeat and have fun with this stuff instead of be frustrated with it. I started producing instructional DVDs. John Sloan over there in the corner, this is how good Eastwood is. I produced a video, it was back when VHS, in 1999 called Paint Your Own Car. And somebody said, hey man, you should send this to Eastwood and see if they. So I called the 800 number on the front of my catalog, the Eastwood catalogs, and I talked to the receptionist. I said, I got a video on how to paint a car. And they said, oh, you need to talk to John Sloan. So they patched me into John Sloan, and he said, send me a copy, let's take a look at it. And they've been a wonderful partner for me since 1999, and every time I add a title, they put it in the catalog for some bizarre reason, but it's been a wonderful relationship. So I love these guys, and the fact that education is very, it's in the forefront, and all that kind of stuff. I just released a new DVD, it's called Fiberglass Repair. I hate fiberglass, and I was afraid of it. I hated it. So it's like, dance with the devil, right? So fiberglass, the more I learned about it, the more I knew about fiberglass, and it just made me feel a little bit more comfortable about it. With the truck show, they sent me up to Downs Manufacturing. Is anybody Downs Street Rods, fiberglass? Yeah, one of the finest fiberglass. They did things like hide the mold seams along style lines and edges to where it wasn't a mold seam line right down the middle of a hood. They would do things like that, but their use of gel coats as a primer surfacer, as a enhancer before the things went out, that changed my mind. It opened my mind about fiberglass, and I pass on some of those techniques in my fiberglass repair video. It's not what this is about. I just want to let you know that it's here, and it's available in the Eastwood catalogs now. So, like I said, if anybody's got any questions, fire away. I am going to give out an Eastwood Summer Classics t-shirt with Jerry Dixie's 59 Impala on it for either the best question or the stupidest question. I don't know which. But and also, if you ever use Durablocks, they give you a bar of soap. I don't know what the connection is. There's a bar of soap in the box of Durablocks, so we're giving the soap away too. I don't even know why. But color sanding and buffing, surface defect correction. What we're doing is enhancing. I always say that the only difference between a Mako paint job to where the vehicle doesn't even have time for the engine oil to cool down by the time it's kicked out the door back to the customer, and a Bobby Alloway paint job, the technology is exactly the same. The way the paint goes on, there's a mechanical or chemical adhesion. There's no difference. The Mako job is the same as a high-end custom job. The difference is the follow-through and the energy that you put in it. It's the effort that you put in and the way that you follow and finish the steps. It's the same technology. But if you look at this little Studebaker truck around here, I just got introduced to the guys that built it. Fantastic craftsmanship. Go outside, smoke this thing over, and a guy drives it. He said they do burnouts in the parking lot with this thing. It's fantastic. It just won the Winfield Award. Gene's eyes are still good. He knows what he's looking at. Smoke this thing over. Look at the fit and finish of this thing. Inside the aprons, the fender wells, there's chassis reinforcement tubes. It's all been cut and rubbed. The surface has been enhanced. Surface defect correction, it's surface enhancement. So just because you get a little bit of trash or dirt in your paint job doesn't mean it's a bad paint job, right? You can fix it. So here's what we're gonna talk about fixing it. How many guys are professional painters? Awesome. Awesome, we got one. How many guys are hobby painters? Okay. How many guys have ever been frustrated with painting? Okay, all right. So, yes, the pro painters, it's no different, guys. I shot in collision shops for a long time, very expensive spray booths. You're going to get a bug that flies in if you're painted the wrong time. You're going to get your sleeve or a piece of masking tape, even if you bag your arms. It's going to happen. You're going to have bad things happen. Surface correction from the top down, it's a way of life. You guys know this. So, two basic types of paint. We've got single-stage urethane, we've got base coat, clear coat. you kind of have to look at them as different animals. Personally, I prefer, when I coach people how to paint, I kind of prod them gently into a two-stage system because of the fact that the clear is more forgiving, it's thicker, you can get into it without getting into the pigment of the paint. With a single stage, I'm not going to say anything. All right. With a single stage, this is your substrate. That's your metal. There's your... Okay, I've got this backwards. This is... See? Okay, I'm an idiot.
Could you say that again? I've got this on tape.
Yes, Jerry Dixie, Street Router Road Tour. All right, I'm going to jump down here. Single stage urethane. You've got your substrate and you've got one continuous layer of paint. The way resin technology works is as it cures, the resin layers and the binders kind of float to the top of that paint layer. So you've got this kind of little skin on the top of that guy. Yes, it's pigment all the way down. So technically, yeah, you got license to kill. You can surface that sucker down, way down to a very thin coating. However, you got to be aware of the fact that just because of resin technology, the very top layer of this holds almost all of your UV screeners that are engineered into the paint. As it floats to the top, you got a thin resin layer, almost like a built-in clear coat layer, on the top of that. So as you surface that down, as you cut and rub that, you're taking away your UV screening. I hope you drive your cars. If they sit out in the sun, you kind of lessen the life of that. So that's another reason that that I kind of lean towards a base coat clear coat system. However, sometimes you want the look of an SSU. I don't know. That's fine. It's a great system, but sometimes you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot like that by going too far. You get down into the pigments, it can chalk up a little bit, it oxidizes a little bit. With the base coat clear coat, here's our substrate, here's our base colors, and we've got a nice layer of clear that is a thinner layer, but it holds more UV screeners, and it allows us to surface things down. So that's the basic difference. When you're cutting a run, when you're shaving a run out of a single stage system, I've run into it on lighter colors. When you do multiple coats, 4, 5, 6 coats, sometimes just like in the lines, the age lines of a tree, when you do a cross cut on a tree, you'll see those lines come up. I've actually had that happen. Scraping a run out of a quarter panel of a car, I had a sag. As I rubbed it out, yes, it was perfectly flat, but I saw those rings of a tree in between my layers of paint. So what do? I've got a single stage paint job. I can't blend it. It's single stage. It's on a quarter panel, so I got to do up onto the A or the B pillar, the roof, and down the other quarter unless I want a weak transition line. So again, you know, if it was base coat clear coat, I could have blended that repair, clear coated everything, get a seamless repair job. So there's just things that you just have to be aware of with that. With the base coat, if you have a run in the clear, it's a run in the clear. So you can fix it easier. If you're a hobby painter, here's the biggest difference, and I will get into a buffing demo. With a single stage, once you pull the trigger, you're committed to that paint job until you're finished that paint job. And this is not a bad thing about single stage, it's a good system. But with a base coat clear coat, you can stop every time you make a coat. You can sand between coats. You can leave it 24 to 48 hours depending on whether you have a catalyst in your base coat or depending on the base coat system. Step back from it, come back the next day. If you're a weekend warrior like all of us, I am too. You can paint on Saturday with your color, come back on Sunday with your clear. When your head's clear, if you've had a chance, you know, it gives you more options, and more importantly, it gives you the ability to stop and correct between every coat and every step of that paint job. So a base coat clear coat system to me is a way better system, especially for somebody that's, you know, you're cutting your teeth and you're getting better at painting. Face it, we never stop learning. If we stop learning, we're underground. So anyway, let's cut and rub some stuff. The guys at Eastwood, they've got a paint lab here. They created a spray out panel for me. I thought it was going to be a fender. It's a Monte Carlo hood. But that's all right. We've got all kinds of defects. And we got single stage on one side, and they layered it up with a clear coat on the other side. Coincidentally, it's an Eastwood paint system. With their single stage, you've got a window to where you can clear coat it, and it chemically cross-links. So you do just like a base coat clear coat, you can actually utilize it like that. Your mill thickness is increased, but you get saturation, you get hiding on your color. You've got, what, Brian, you know the recoat window? It's a long time. It's like, how much?
18 hours.
18 hours. and then you could put clear coat on top of it. So essentially, you've got a single stage clear coat job. You know, and then you can do intermix and all that kind of stuff. And that's a custom technique that if we have time, we'll talk about, which is a really cool way to present single stage where it makes it a lot nicer to buff too. And you get a little bit of refraction in it. So that's the basic difference between base coat, clear coat, and single stage. So how many guys have ever, yes, John?
I'm sorry, I had a question. You know, I've sold new cars and I've worked briefly in a restoration shop, and what has amazed me is that a lot of these base clear cars,
Yeah.
they sit out in the lot, especially if they've just come off the trailer.
Yeah.
You get some sap on there and it
Yeah.
etches into the clear coat.
Yeah.
And we had to cut and buff a couple of them
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah.
And is that typical, or is that just because the clear wasn't hard enough, or what's going on?
It's not because the clear wasn't hard enough. We were trained in body shops to be able to correct rail dust. Rail dust, you know, now the cars are mostly covered because they're tired of doing warranty claims on this stuff. But rail dust, acid rain damage, bug guts, bird droppings, it's all acidic, and it does etch into the paint. So what happens there is you've got a high content acid in a small thing, even a raindrop with chemicals if you're by like a steel plant or something like that. What happens when that raindrop evaporates is that concentration goes around the edge just because of surface tension. As the raindrop gets smaller, it etches down in, and it can technically go right down to the substrate. So what John is asking, and his question was, can you color sand and buff those defects out? Answer is yes, of course. That's not the end of the story. What we were taught in collision repair to hold the warranty of the OE paint or the resprays that we did is that you have to neutralize, that's a great question by the way, you have to neutralize that damage. Rail dust, whatever. So the solution that I have is it's a solution of 1 quart of water, warm water, and 1 tablespoon of baking soda, household baking soda. How many people have ever put baking soda underneath a battery tray? Yeah, and it stops the rust, or it stops the acid from eating down into the bottom of the tray and the apron. It's because it neutralizes that acid. So this is it's a softer solution of that, but baking soda and water gives you that neutralization and stops that process. And what it does, if you can cut and rub it and surface it from the top down, if that acid is still in the paint, it's going to continue to etch and it's going to come back. And if we didn't do this baking soda solution process on rail dust on a light colored car, it looks like little specks of rust in the hood. It's going to come back and it's going to show up again. I had a customer come back and say, yeah, I know you fixed it, but it's back. And you're looking at the guy like you're full of crap. No, it was back. I saw the spots again. So anyway, that's something to remember.
What was that solution again? A gallon of water?
1 quart of warm water and 1 tablespoon of baking soda. Yeah, quart and a tablespoon. And
You just rub into it?
you don't have to rub into it. Just use it as a wash. And it kind of leaves a film, so you got to come back with soap and water. But it stops the acid. It neutralizes the acid. So even when you're detailing, if you drive your cars, you're going to get environmental damage and dust and all that kind of stuff.
Bird dropping?
Yeah, bird droppings. Yeah, and bird droppings are horrible. Birds eat rocks to help their digestive system, and it comes out in the poop, even if it's not a rock. So, don't just rub that bird dust off. Soak that dust off, or dropping. But yeah, so it does that, and even once a year, just to do a baking soda wash down on your car, once a year, neutralizes the acid, sets it up for your waxes and all that kind of stuff. So there's a tip for you.
Would a single stage be less likely to be damaged by tree sap and other environmental pollution?
I don't think so. Catalyzed urethane is catalyzed urethane. And here's the other thing, and I wanted to talk about this too. A lot of guys have asked me, can I cut and buff my original paint job? I've got a new Ram truck or a new Silverado. It's shiny, but it looks like it looks like cottage cheese, or it's crazy orange peel. Well, in the first place, that's engineered into the finish because a very slick surface will take rock chips way more than the contoured bowling balls of an OE finish. It actually acts as a deflector, because it's not a flat surface, and sometimes the whatever is hitting the paint will actually roll off of it. The reason that they put an 8.5-inch ring gear, a 10-bolt rear axle in a 300 horsepower Camaro from the factory is because they could, and because they figured it would last until the warranty ran out. That's the paint systems. The paint systems for OE cars, it's a way different process than a respray. It's a single coat of clear, they're computer-controlled atomizers, and they bake at about 240 degrees. It's a way different animal. And they can get their UV strength and get out their 5-year warranty with a single coat of clear. It's a different system. When you do a respray, yes, it's catalyzed, it's a different clear coat. So you're kind of dealing with a different animal. So yes, you can cut and rub your OE stuff, but just like I talked about, that thin screen of UV on top, exponentially more important on an OE paint job. So yeah, you can cut it flat. You're really putting a good sacrifice on the longevity of that paint job. And if you cut it, your warranty's gone too. So anyway, you can do it. I saw a Hot Rod Magazine article on it. I think Steve Mignante did it. They cut and rubbed this truck, turned out beautiful, and then you never ever saw the truck again. So I don't know what that means, but so let's talk about sanding. There's a dividing line between body work and prep work. That dividing line is, in my brain, 220 grit. 220 and below, you're shaping. 220 and above, you're prepping for paint. Now, between 400 and 600 grit, that's the other transition between prepping for paint and surface correction. Different varying degrees, it's all over the map. And it's just my experience that shows me that from about, 400 is way aggressive, it's crazy aggressive. But 400 to 600, then you can start and go through stages and go 400, 800, 1,000, 12, 15, 2,000, up to 3,000, 4,000 grits, and then bring back and enhance for gloss. But what we're gonna do is just kind of give a quick and dirty on that. I like Norton paper. Eastwood sells it. Everything I'm using today is available through the Eastwood catalogs. I like the Norton Black Ice, the Liquid Ice buffing system, and I'll talk about all of that stuff. The Norton paper is less expensive than some of your better-known brands. It's nice quality stuff. It really is. So me, I don't get free stuff. The TV show gets free stuff. I don't get free stuff. So I use what I can affordably use and get a great result from. So I just keep that in mind. So 400 is very aggressive, but I'm going to show you a quick demo. All right, I'm about to sand this panel, which is a huge freaking mistake right now. Because why? There's smudges on it, it's dirty, it's horrible, it's bad. So my first step in any cut and rub job, color sanding and buffing job, is to take, I don't even use paper towels because they're dry and they can be abrasive. It's an inconsistent weave. I like microfiber. Every time you wash a microfiber towel, the fibers expand. It gets nicer and nicer and nicer and nicer. I've got stacks of them in my shop. They're available in bundles. When I first did the color sanding and buffing video, it was kind of a new thing, and I just raved about them in the video, and I always use them. So, first step, step one, I use a glass cleaner, aerosol glass cleaner. It's got a bit of alcohol in it, which acts as an anti-static, and I want to talk about that a little bit later. So, you got to clean your surface. So, I just do one of those, wipe off in one direction. Not the boy band.
Why only one direction?
What you're wanting to do, get it wet, just like when you're wiping down for paint. You're not rubbing the contaminations in, you're floating the contamination out. You get it wet, and if I'm doing this, what am I doing to that dust and stuff? I'm rubbing it right back in. So if I wipe it in one direction, technically I've floated that contamination, that dirt off, and I'm evacuating it from the panel on a cushion of liquid. That's important to understand, especially on black panels. On dark colors, those scratches can just break your heart, and different lights affect different things. This is fluorescent light. It's very kind to paint. You have like mercury vapor, or it can show your halos and your holograms and spider webs, and it's just crazy. So step one, always, 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 and we're going to do this side too, is to clean your surface. And here I am doing what I said not to do and rubbing it in. We're not going to win any awards with this hood, and it ain't going back on that Mahdi. So we're going to put this off to the side because, like I said, they can be laundered. As a lubricant, they make spray lubricants, a detail spray, stuff like that. I've just got water. It's just tap water, and you can see the foam bubbles on the top. A drop of dishwashing liquid. I like just the cheapest stuff you can buy because there's no moisturizers in it. I don't care if my hands are soft. My wife would argue that. I don't care. It doesn't matter. That's not the function of it. A drop of ivory liquid or some kind of a really cheap dishwashing liquid in here gives you a nice lubricant for your sandpaper, and it just makes the paper glide a little bit better. It's different than a car wash. Don't use a car wash. The pH level with A dishwashing liquid is very, very different than a car wash. It's a high pH in a car wash, so it doesn't strip your wax off. It's a low pH in, and correct me if I've got that backwards, John.
I think it might be backwards.
Okay, so it's a low pH
You
in,
want to be as close to neutral as possible.
Yeah, close-
Number 7,
yeah.
which would be pure water.
Okay, so now you're talking
It's
technical.
real strong lye, you know, and,
Okay.
the lower numbers are real strong acid.
Okay,
But,
yeah. So your dishwashing liquid has an acid, so it cuts grease on your dishes. So it's a better cleaner than a car wash. A car wash, you don't want it to strip your carnauba off. That's the biggest difference. So you get a low acid, which is a car wash. That's, I don't know. So a little bit difference there. But I've got just dishwashing liquid and water. So I'm going to prep my panel, and I'm going to do this. When I'm sanding, and this is 400, and I'm just doing this for the sake of the demonstration, how many people use blocks? How many people use hands? How many people use sanding blocks when they're cut and rubbing?
I just use aluminum.
Yeah, use a piece of aluminum, paint paddle, stuff like that. You know this, but it's a good parlor trick. And I'm going to be exaggerating, right? This is a 400 grit piece of paper. I'm going to give it 3 strokes there. And what do I got? I've got frickin' Valley Forge and the Grand Canal in there. Yeah, exactly. The heel of my hand, it's not a sanding block. That's easier to get a flat surface. It's not a sanding block. So I highly recommend, and I don't care what brand you use, paint paddle, piece of aluminum. Tim Strange from Strange Motion uses acrylic sticks. He likes a very, very hard substrate. The way he gets his unbelievable quality finishes is by engineering the finish from the top down. He puts an inordinate amount. He can stack 7 coats of a high build urethane and not get any solvent pop. I don't know how, but it's how he paints. He's a masterful painter. But he told me once, he said, I don't know. I paint like an idiot. I just spray it till it's shiny and I'm done, and I stop at 7 coats. But he never gets any solvent trapping, So anyway, but he engineers the flatness from the top down. So he uses acrylic sticks. Whatever works for you. I like the Durablocks, and I also like the soft sanders, and we'll talk about them. But, and of course, this is just a gross demo. We're going to just give that a few strokes. That's the same amount. It's like a contact patch on a high-performance tire. It's flat. We're talking about reflection. We want a nice, clear reflection. We've just created a very flat surface, whereas sanding with my fingertips, it's different. However, you can use your thumb. If you're sanding in here, yeah, sometimes the rounded surface of your fingers, that helps too. That's where these guys come in. And I'll pass this around. These are soft sanders. Dave Walsh invented this. It's a closed cell foam. They're solvent proof. You can dip this in thinner. They don't melt. But this thing, it's an oval shape. There's tons of shapes. And you can lay this and cradle that in there, wrap it with paper, and it contours beautifully. They're inexpensive, and he's engineered shapes into them. He's got a louver shape where you can cut and rub louvers without getting in there with your hands. It's a neat system. Check it out if you get a chance. Again, they're available from the Eastwood store, online catalog. But this allows you to cut in areas like that in a second. He's got them color keyed. Yeah, it's sort of like Fisher-Price, but you can identify the colors with the shape. It doesn't take long for that association. I dig them. I like these blocks. So we're on a clear coat. I said, hey, hang a run in the panel. They flooded this panel like crazy. I don't know what it is. I think it's Lake Michigan on a rough day. I don't know. It's crazy. But
$39.99. We're this hour early, $39.99. That's a savings of $30.
if I have a strategy for damage. If I'm just nibbing for trash or a little bit of texture, I will start with 1500 grit because I'm happy with the way the panel has flowed. I'm not dealing with the run. I'm not dealing with collected cottage cheese, whatever you want to call it. Chatter, guys have different names for it. I'm not dealing with that. 1500 grit, I'm using that for basic surface correction. Then I go 15 and then 2000. Sometimes I'll step to 3000 if it's a cured surface. So I'm going to grab 1500. Thank you. Oh, here, pass that around. Pass that around too. And by the way, there's cameras watching you if you light finger the stuff. I'm kidding. Well, actually, no, I'm not. There's a camera sitting up there. So. And by the way, I want to extend a very special thanks to Eastwood for allowing us to do this in here. It's way more comfortable. I don't have to be the ShamWow guy with the mic on, and you guys can hear what I'm saying, and we can have a nice exchange if you got questions. I was taught a long time ago to do a tri-fold on paper, fold it a couple of times. Maybe I won't look like an idiot doing this. You create a serrated edge, and hopefully it comes apart nice and easy. Not bad, not bad. But with the tri-fold, you can, you know, you got 3 different surfaces to work on and one to grab on. So I like to soak my paper. I like to get it wet, because the backing, it won't let go of the grit, but what it does, when you do a hard edge, sometimes it can create an imperfect line, and that can dig in, you can cut grooves into the panel. So soaking your paper ahead of time, again with a little drop of soapy water, that really helps. It doesn't take long, 10, 15 minutes. If you're prepping, you set your paper down in a quart bucket or a gallon bucket, wipe your panel. By the time you're ready to sand, it's good and ready. So that helps. And again, this is all about the little things. It's all about the details. What makes a perfect paint job, if that even ever exists, is the follow through and the detail work. So every little thing that you can do is really going to help you. So I'm going to use my DuraBlock. How many people have watched the Color Sanding and Buffing DVD? Okay, so we've got a few. I talk about technique with that DVD, and I talk about going in a circular pattern because that's what I was taught. Now, I've had debates with guys that every time they change a grit, and this is interesting to me, like for instance, okay, we're aggressive here, we're 400. Pattern's going this way. Lube my paper first, lube the panel. Now I'm cross-cutting. This is interesting to me. I like this. It's almost like a guide coat. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but you're cross-hatching your scratch patterns. So the way to tell if you're done with one grit is if you don't see any scratches in it. You know, so that's a nice way to disguise or to move up with a step. Who's had a paint job haze back after you've cut and buffed it? Yeah, you get sand scratch swells, it clouds, all that kind of stuff. It breaks your heart. One way to help eliminate that is to make sure that before you go to step 2, you're done with step 1. So this technique, I've kind of changed my mind on it, and you can do the same thing with a circular pattern or a crosshatch pattern, or, you know, X pattern, plus signs, whatever. But the important thing is to wipe out the sand scratches of your first step with the second step. So that gets us there. And I can see right here, I don't know if you guys can see it. If you want to step a little closer, I can still see those 400 grit scratches in there. I'm not done yet. If I start compounding that or move on to my next step, I'm bridging over that stuff and it's going to come back and haunt me. So,
Kevin, what are you using now?
this is 1500 grit.
15, okay.
Yeah, so it's a well, like I was saying before, if I'm just doing minor surface defect, I start with 15. If it's just a little bit of trash or a little bit of texture in the surface, I start with 15. I don't like to get any more aggressive than 800. 800 is really taking some material off, and I use that as just a sort of a surface prep. Then I flatten, then I come back with 1,000, 15, 2,000. Oh, we won't go through all those steps because you guys have a car show to see.
Yeah,
But,
can I ask you one question?
yes, sir.
I like to, I'm real good at putting on a lot of orange peel.
Okay.
And when I do my first cut,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's so bad, what I'll do is I'll just mist it with some white upholstery dye. I got a black paint job.
Yeah.
And then I'm using that as like a guide coat.
Yeah, interesting.
Is that a stupid idea?
No, it's not a stupid idea. John brings up an interesting thing. He uses a contrasting color to act as a guide coat. Who knows what a guide coat is? When you're blocking, yeah, I like dry guide coats. I block everything dry. It's a techniques I learned in collision repair. You don't have time to wait for the panel to dry. It'll break your heart if water leaches out when you're in the booth. I learned how to do everything dry. So I use dry guide coats or a nice spray guide coat, which is not paint. Eastwood spray guide coat is a guide coat. It's a high carbon spray that evacuates the solvent really quickly, and it's a guide coat. It's not flat black paint. There's a very big difference. So don't use flat black paint and introduce another chemical into your paint job if you're blocking, because if some gets left in there, it's just, to me, it just freaks me out. I stay awake at night over it. But what John's talking about is a contrasting color, essentially a guide coat over top of your panel before you're buffing. T.C. Pennick from Bay One Customs taught me this technique. This is a silver Sharpie. On a white or a lighter paint job, a black Sharpie. What I'm going to do is I'm going to color on it. This is a permanent marker. but you've got a cross-linked catalyzed paint system, don't freak out. It's not going to etch into it. It's sitting on the surface. I'll never forget the first time I did that in the TV studio. They lost their freaking mind because I ruined a panel and they thought they were going to have it resprayed. I said, calm down, you know, it's okay. So now that that's dry to touch, I'm just going to glaze over the top and just skate over the top of it. The dark spots are high spots. The spots where there's still Sharpie in there, those are low spots. It's a guide coat. Great question, great tip. If you're unsure, if you can't sight it, if you're in a poor lighting situation, you need a little visual aid, use a Sharpie. It works great. Just use a contrasting color, whatever you're using. So I'm going to continue with this spot with 15. We're just going to buff a little spot out. And we're on clear coat. The biggest way to identify whether you're on single stage or clear coat is the color of the slurry. If you're unsure, that's white and milky. This is gray and black. It's a simple test. So if you're unsure, if you got a customer car or you got a vehicle that you're not sure what it is, find a place that's not in the middle of the center of the hood, sand a little bit, and you'll be able to tell whether it's clear coat or not. And that is clear. So we're done with our 15, whether we are or not, moving along. Now I'm going to move to 2000. Can you cut that for me? I've got a technique that my dad showed me a long, long time ago. I call it the run razor method. For cutting runs and cutting nibs, Eastwood has these. It's a razor file. This is the nib file. These are really cool too. So it's kind of like a pre-prep for sanding. This is wow. There's a dirt nib there, and I'm basically leveling the dirt nib down from the top. This levels from the top down, doesn't affect the surrounding area other than it's kind of an aggressive scratch. So I use these in extreme circumstances, but my run razor technique is pretty cool too. Thank you very much. What's your name? Dave? Dave wrote in an open roadster with a matte finish. We're going to talk about matte finish. Awesome car. Great looking car. Sounds good too. What's in it? Small block 350. Cool. What transmission? 350. Yeah. What kind of fuel economy? Doesn't matter, does it? We don't.
Does it very well.
The dinosaurs are dead, folks. They're dead. And that sounds irreverent. We want to be politically correct. We want to be environmentally aware. Let's all hold hands. Yes, they do. They live on. We're respecting the dinosaurs by creating new life with them. I'm green. I recycle. You know what? They did. We did call it the Dog and Pony Show at RTM, where we do the TV shows, and they had Senator Marsha Blackburn came in, and she was doing a tour and this and that because she's part of the SEMA Sand Board and all that kind of stuff, or associated with, you know, preserving the hobby, all that kind of stuff. And we were talking about, and this is back when Cash for Clunkers was big, and we're talking about, you know, and I said, you know what, nobody's talking about the fact that let's be green, let's recycle. What are we? We're hot rodders. We're taking old cars and we're bringing them back to life. Who's a better recycler than the automotive aftermarket? Nobody. Nobody. To mass produce a new car, you're talking about a carbon footprint, whatever the heck that is, a carbon footprint to make a new car. Let's bring another one in to the game, a used car, a classic car. That's already been done. That pollution's already gone and dissipated and been breathed in, and the trees have already taken it back. It's already been done. You know, let's make less new cars. Let's revive the old cars. I don't know. Yeah, okay, I'm on a soapbox, literally. So I'm just saying, you know, remind somebody that when they bash you about your gas guzzling, blah, 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 blah. You're recycling it. You're greener than they're ever going to be. Good point. All right, so now we got 2,000. And I did about a 45 on this side. I'm going to come back and just change my direction up a little bit. Can you hear the difference? You know what you're not hearing? The sound of gravel trapped in between that block, which will cut grooves. And again, you gotta start the process over again. So again, your microfiber towels, they're your best friend. So we're going to do that, and I'm just going to call that done. I was taught to color, sand, and buff by Juan Alejandra Porsche in Venice, California. It was back in 1986, and I was starving to death in Los Angeles trying to be a rock star. And we all know how that turned out, because I'm not on the radio. Juan, you know, clear coats were way different back then. So he called me Killer because he couldn't ever remember my name. So he had me cut and rub, start with 1,000, go to 15, and I think we buffed everything from 15. It was at that 3M compound that was in a gallon bucket, the paste, the whatever, coarse cut, I can't remember the name of it. You know what I'm talking about, right? So anyway, so he would say, sand it with 1,000. He said, go over every inch of the panel. Do it again. When you're done, do it again. And he would bust me. He'd have somebody watching me. He said, now when you move to 1,500, do the same thing. Do it again. The same thing with compounding. You start with the wool, and then you move up to the next nap or the next foam. He would make me do everything 3 times, and I hated him. I was mad at him. Every single time he would have me do that. But it taught me to finish one step before you go to the next step. And it was one of the best lessons that I hate him for. Anyway, so now we're 2,000 grit. Now we're ready to cut and rub, right? So let's talk about buffing systems. How many people use a multi-step compound? 3M has them. A bunch of people, you got your coarse, medium, fine, and then your glazes. That's where I learned to cut and rub, or learned the compounds. They're great. They're great compounds. Technology has really grown. Norton has their liquid ice system. This is a single-step compound that it chemically breaks down, as well as it's, you know, let's face it, compound is liquid sandpaper, but this chemically breaks down paint as well and adds as an extra layer of, yeah, we're good, of abrasion. Joe, you get that? All right, that's going on YouTube. That's going on YouTube. Yes. Did I? All right, well, you're in the combat zone right here. Sorry, pal. What's your name?
Gene.
Gene's screwed. He's screwed. All right. So, Norton Liquid Ice. There's 3 different pads. You start with wool because wool creates a lot of heat. It really helps with abrasion. Then you go with the blue, and then you go with the white. Pass these around. I'm going to start with wool. We know what wool feels like. Feel the difference between those 2 pads. It's a really neat system. It's got what I call a locating nub. How many people have ever tried to center a buffing pad and the thing, you know, and it wobbles all over the place? Whatever engineer said, you know what? We could do better. So they did. So you got a locating nub, and I've got 0 vibration in the pad. It's not going to drive me nuts. Does it affect the way you buff? I don't know. Maybe. What's that? Speed. Okay. Do you really? Okay. Yeah, different. He said he buffs around 1,400 RPM. The point is, variable speed buffer. I kind of float, I kind of fluctuate, but I start off typically about 1,000, and then I read the panel and I see. But this is a DeWalt buffer. We're not buffing at this speed. It's not gonna.